Let's start with the end in mind. In an outsourced agreement, what is important is not to have an efficient and effective outsourced operation. It is important to have an efficient and effective extended enterprise, which includes the retained organization and the outsourced organization. In the end, for an employee of a customer, it is not important who the portal they access belongs to, as long as it provides the information he or she needs and triggers the processes that are needed for him or her. This requires boundary-less connection between the two parts of the enterprise, and the technology of the retained organization and the outsourced piece need to be put side by side and function perfectly well to provide this experience. Think about the human brain as an example. The human brain is composed of two hemispheres. They are specialized too, they do different things, and they share information with each other. What is important to understand is that they function as one. And the same should be said for an outsourced agreement. You have a retained organization that does specific things, specializes in specific things, and then cooperates with another part of the organization. That in the end is a mirror, continuous processes that have been triggered by the first part, and the whole thing functions as one. Information technology needs to be able to enable this information sharing and make the whole extended enterprise operate as one in full integration. As a consequence, the design of a retained organization is a much more holistic exercise than what is typically thought. It's an exercise of designing a retained part of the organization together with the outsourced part of the organization. And it's an exercise of designing the technology part of it together with the process part of it, all at the same time. The design of information technology in a retained organization is an exercise of designing the data and the business logics. Let's talk about the data first. Data must be consistent and univocous across the boundaries of this extended organization. Think about an absence. What is an absence? That concept should be delineated in the data structure, in the master data records, that the retained and the outsourced part of the outsourcing deal comprise. So in the first place, there needs to be this consistency of data across the organization. And secondly, it is important that the data range that is exchanged is deep enough to provide the fodder, if you will, for a proper integration, not just a shallow interfacing. Effectively, the answers to all these questions are situational. However, the ability for a provider to bring best practices to the fore that can be replicated from one client to the other is, in my opinion, in my experience, a very strong symptom of a service provider who is able to bring value to the table. So the ability of a provider to give a certain point of view is going to be a good symptom of the ability of the provider to guarantee economies of scale, process optimization, and also access to labor in cheaper and more cost-effective locations in general. In my experience, I have noticed in these years that the quality of the design is directly correlated with the quality of the people who are brought into the decision-making process, who are brought to the table. So there must be technology experts, there must be process experts, there must be management stakeholders. All together, they need to evaluate the pros and cons of the different technology choices that concern the retained organization in the first place, but also the extended enterprise as a whole. Ideally, these experts should come from the service provider, from the client, and possibly, when appropriate, from the technology vendor. The ability of these three parties to work together and design a retained organization as part of an extended enterprise is a significant advantage in the design of the entire business process. The ADP-SAP relationship is, in my opinion, a very good example and to some extent a golden standard of what we've been discussing so far. The ability of a software vendor like SAP who has invested in BPO-specific capabilities and the ability of a service provider, an exceptionally competent one in its domain like ADP, working together, generate additional extra value for the client. The end result, I believe, is a truly more mature business process outsourcing.